Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and a warm welcome to the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize Lecture and Forum. This is a dedicated platform for the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2020 Laureate, Vienna, and special mentions Antwerp, Boston, and Lisbon to share their diverse urban development experiences and key learning points with cities around the world. My name is Sabrina, and I'll be your MC for this session. During this event, we would like to remind audience members to kindly keep your masks on. Please set your phones and beeping devices to silent mode. In accordance with the Personal Data Protection Policy, it is our duty to inform you that this session will be recorded. If you feel unwell, please approach anyone with an organizer badge. I now invite you to turn your attention to the screen for a message on safe management measures from our event venue. Okay, we will just carry on. So joining us today, we have our distinguished members of the Prize Nominating Committee, Professor Marilyn Taylor and Mr. Wong Man Sam, to moderate the panel discussion. We also have the chair of the Prize Nominating Committee, Dr. Cheong Koon Hien, who will deliver the opening remarks for the prize lecture and forum. Dr. Cheong is the chair of the Center of Liveable Cities and the chair of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities. Before that, she was the CEO of the Housing and Development Board Singapore from 2010 to 2020, overseeing the development and management of over 1 million public housing flats. She was also the CEO of the Urban Redevelopment Authority from 2004 to 2010 and steered the urban planning and development of Singapore. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Cheong on stage to deliver the opening remarks. Dr. Cheong, please.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I'm very pleased to welcome you here today. Today, we are joined by the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2020 Laureate and Special Mentions to share with us their experiences and outstanding achievements. In the past few decades, cities have grown at an unprecedented speed and scale. This has created a slew of urban challenges arising from unmet demand for infrastructure, services, and affordable housing. We talked a lot about actually unaffordable housing this morning, to choking pollution and traffic gridlock. And amidst these developments, we decided to seek out cities that were best in class in the world so that Singapore, as well as other cities, could draw inspiration and ideas to help us to deal with these challenges. For these reasons, Singapore launched the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize and awarded the inaugural prize in 2010. Named after Singapore's founding Prime Minister, the prestigious Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize embodies Mr. Lee's ingenuity and determination in developing innovative city solutions. The prize honors outstanding contributions to the creation of vibrant, livable, and sustainable urban communities. When conceptualizing the prize, we grappled with what the prize should stand for and what key attributes the winning city should exhibit to merit the award. It is clear to us that a successful city requires a forward-looking, comprehensive, and long-term approach in tackling urban challenges, but backed by strong leadership and good urban governance. And we talked about this at the Mayor's Forum yesterday. Urban solutions also must be innovative and scalable and sustainable over time to achieve lasting success. And this brings me to the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2020 Laureate, the city of Vienna, Republic of Austria. Vienna is awarded the 2020 prize for reinventing itself for success in the 21st century without losing its identity as a capital for culture, music, and history. The Austrian capital epitomizes a holistic planning approach with a clear and shared vision as seen in STEP 2025, its urban development plan. Before that, the city has completed a 21-kilometer flood protection channel in 1989 that not only prevented catastrophic floods, but also provided large recreational areas during non-flood times. And Vienna is also committed to providing affordable housing and mobility options and harnessing technology as an enabling tool to achieve long-term social and environmental objectives, while providing platforms for citizens to co-create public spaces. In addition to the prize laureate, the jury panel also recognizes cities that have made good progress and demonstrate unique urban initiatives that other cities can learn from. For the 2020 prize, 3 cities have been recognized as special mentions, namely Antwerp, Kingdom of Belgium, Boston, United States of America, and Lisbon, the Portuguese Republic. Congratulations all. The special mentions have demonstrated how they turn constraints into opportunities to build innovative and highly livable cities. For example, Antwerp has evolved from a haphazard post-war development to an urban regeneration model guided by slow urbanism. Boston has rebounded from its decline in the 1980s into a knowledge economy today, while Lisbon has turned around from decades of financial challenges to become an attractive city on the rise. And today, we are very honored to have His Excellency, Dr. Michael Ludwig, Mayor and Governor of Vienna, His Excellency Bart de Wever, Mayor of Antwerp, Mr. Brian Golden, Director Emeritus of Boston Planning and Development Agency, and Ms. Sophia Murao, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Municipal Director of Urbanism, Lisbon. And they will share with us on the city's successful transformation stories. I look forward to this morning's session, which I believe will inspire all of us and provide us with many good learning points. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheong. We will now invite the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2020 laureate to share. His Excellency Dr. Michael Ludwig, Mayor and Governor of Vienna, will be presenting the session. Dr. Ludwig was elected as Mayor and Governor since 2018. Before that, he served as a City Councillor for Housing, Construction and Urban Renewal from 2007 until his election as Mayor. His Excellency, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, what does the city of the future look like? How do you reconcile urbanism and nature? These are questions that concern us all. And the young city-state of Singapore, host of the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize, offers surprising answers to this question. Just recently, the respected German newspaper, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, wrote about what they called an artificial giant tree in the heart of Singapore. The 27 floors of the tower, which also hosts the Oasia Hotel, are framed and cooled by 2,000 tropical climbing plants. Instead of branches, this enormous tree has light and airy platforms that are like nests in which city dwellers can relax and forget the urban stress. It is a tree of the future, the journalist wrote, because it shows us how we will live in times of climate change, with nature, not against it. That I, as the mayor of the Austrian capital, Vienna, now have the honor of accepting the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2020 in this city in a garden, Singapore, seems especially fitting to me. Because, as I hope to show you in the next 15 minutes, Vienna is also a model city when it comes to a smart and sustainable urban future. That means we don't ignore problems. We find answers that work to the issues that challenge us. We don't just shrug and look away, we look for solutions instead. Vienna placing the focus on people. And that is nothing new in our city. We have a long tradition of it. 100 years ago, after the end of the First World War and the end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the new Vienna had a mission statement that guided all municipal activities. Vienna places the focus on people. That is why, unlike many other European cities, Vienna has not privatized public services in areas such as housing, energy, water supply, wastewater disposal, or waste management, but has ensured that they stay under municipal control. Many other European cities that sold off important services of general interest, often as short-term solution to budget problems, soon had to resume control of those services which are so essential for the citizens. There have been 700 remunicipalizations in 20 European countries in recent years. At this point, let me talk about our world-famous Vienna water. Our pure, delicious mountain spring water has been flowing into the city through a system of over 30 aqueducts with no need for pumps for more than 150 years. 440 million liters of fresh water flow into the city every day. And the water is just as clean when it leaves again, cleaned by a water treatment facility that is not only completely energy self-sufficient, but has also produced more electricity than uses since 2020. Our focus on the people also extends to mobility. The dense public transport network is the green mobility backbone of our city. Every day, our underground trains, buses and trams, which the Viennese call BIM, travel 214,000 kilometers daily. That's equivalent to 5 times around the world. Over the course of a year, the total distance traveled is 78 million kilometers. That's the distance from Earth to Mars. The outcome is sensational. More people in Vienna have an annual season ticket than have a car. And it's very affordable. The annual season ticket is priced at €1 per day. Our city has another legendary asset, affordable and high-quality housing. Even 100 years ago, the new Vienna built 63,000 new flats in just 15 years, among them the world-famous municipal housing. And for many of the new tenants, it was the first time ever that they had their own bed and a well-ventilated flat with natural light, their own toilet, running water and gas. This was the beginning of the affordable housing for 100 years in our city. 62% of the city's inhabitants live in apartments which are owned or subsidized by the city. This keeps the rents at an affordable level and allows us to set standards for new buildings, including ecological ones. As you see, there are many reasons why Vienna was just recently once again ranked as the world's most livable city by the Economist Group, which I, as mayor, am of course very proud of. But it would be foolish to rest on these laurels in light of the many complex challenges of our urban future. That is why I would like to speak briefly about the three central aspects that guide our city's policy for the future: social matters, innovation, and resources. Vienna is a city of social inclusion. In other words, we leave no one behind and exclude nobody. Social cohesion and respectful treatment of others are important to us. I would like to illustrate this on our Grätzl model. Grätzl is the Viennese word for neighborhoods, and we want to make sure that different generations and cultures can live in harmony in each Grätzl, and that people have a say in measures that help improve the community spirit. Different projects bring the local communities closer together, such as the Grätzl Oase community and neighborhood gardens. Participation in the Grätzl is also important when it comes to climate matters. In our new project, Vienna Climate Team, local residents are invited to submit their own ideas for climate protection. They are the experts for their own neighborhood and know best what needs to be done. In short, Vienna has chosen the path of sustainable urban development. Municipal housing, mixed neighborhoods, and short distances between home, work, and school create an urban setting with a high quality of life. Urban planning in Vienna follows the vision of a polycentric city, in which new local centers are developed alongside existing ones, providing everything people need on a daily basis. As an added benefit, that also makes it more fun to walk and cycle. That is also possible on Vienna's beautiful hiking paths around the city and over 1,650 kilometers of cycle paths and lanes. This year alone, we are starting 44 new cycle path projects to promote active mobility for the Viennese. In future, we want every person in Vienna to have access to sufficient green space no further than 250 meters from their home. Considering that we are the top city in the world's greenest cities ranking, and already 53% of our city territory are green spaces and water, this seems like a realistic goal. By the way, you can already see the intelligent and sustainable city of the future in Vienna, in our model neighborhood and urban development project, Seestadt Aspern, Vienna's urban lakeside, which has garnered a lot of attention around the world. Next to an artificial lake, we are developing affordable, high-quality housing for 25,000 people by 2030. Home, workplace, and leisure facilities will be close together in this city of short distances. Seestadt Aspern also functions as an urban lab, a place where innovations like self-driving buses and smart buildings can be tested. We also have urban labs in the middle of the city. For example, in the new neighborhoods on former railway stations, where we have high-quality residential and recreational spaces that are characterized by the principles of social and functional mix. Speaking of Seestadt Aspern, a one-of-a-kind project for respect and community is being built here. The campus of religions. It will be a center of interfaith dialogue of all recognized faiths and religious communities. While questions of faith are often used intentionally in parts of the world to foster division or even provoke armed conflict, Vienna aims to provide the best possible conditions for mutual understanding and cooperation among religious communities. Of course, looking forward does not mean we should not look at the acute and often very unpleasant challenges of the present. In this context, I would like to talk about two truly burning issues: climate change and the danger of impending energy scarcity, which has become all the more acute with the war in Ukraine. However, we have already been working on our ambitious goals for a while. Our Smart Climate City strategy aims to make Vienna completely carbon neutral by 2040. In order to reach this goal, the city of Vienna has developed a bundle of measures. We are investing 1.2 billion euro in photovoltaic installations alone, on meadows, but also on the roofs and facades of buildings. The city introduced special community solar power plants, which allow the residents to invest directly in green solar energy. Over 10,000 Viennese have already taken up this opportunity. The city plans to roll out photovoltaic installations with a combined output of 800 megawatts by 2030. This will produce green electricity for 250,000 households. Under this plan, the annual increase in photovoltaic models will be equivalent to 100 football pitches. We also have a spectacular project for using geothermal energy. It is also quite remarkable that our city has a well-developed agricultural sector. 1/3 of the local demand for fruit and vegetables is met with urban agriculture that uses 14% of the city's area. And I'm sure that the excellent Viennese wine, which is one of our regional specialties, alongside our clear mountain water, is known in the restaurants and bars of Singapore too. Since the jury of the Kuan Yew World City Prize referenced it, let me briefly mention the highly developed flood protection measures in our city, which lies on the river Danube. To prevent floods, a 20-kilometer-long island was built in the middle of the river. Today, the Danube Island is also a popular recreational area with 42 kilometers of beaches. In the heat of the summer, many Viennese happily turn into island dwellers who spend more time along the water than in the city center. And since we are speaking of challenges, Vienna has so far reasonably well managing the COVID-19 pandemic that is challenging all of us these days. With free tests for everyone and vaccination campaigns, we have been able to face this challenge. In this context, I would like to mention the concept of digital humanism, which we are using increasingly. It means that we ensure that digitalization is used to improve people's lives and foster the common good. Secure and resilient systems, data protection, privacy, and teaching digital skills to everyone, starting in school, are central requirements for this. In other words, on the way to becoming the capital of digitalization, and this is a goal that's close to my heart, just like the campus of religions, the focus in Vienna is always on the people. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were to ask me what the Viennese recipe for success is, it might perhaps be this. We look to the future and remember our history, our traditional experiences and values, and our culture. And if on the next Year's Day, you are among the millions of viewers around the world who watch the traditional New Year's concert of the Vienna Philharmonic, then I hope you will toast with us to a Happy New Year and a shared, smart, human, sustainable, and peaceful urban future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the insightful presentation on Vienna. There will now be a sharing from the 3 cities awarded special mentions. I would now like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Bart de Wever, Mayor of Antwerp. Mayor de Wever has been the General Chairman of N-VA, a Flemish political party, since 2004. He has been the Mayor of Antwerp since 2013. Mayor de Wever, please.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by congratulating Vienna by winning the prize. Herr Burgermeister, ik gratuleer Ihnen zu Ihrem Gewinn. I speak German as well. As you can see on the slide, Antwerp is a port city, and we have been a main port to Europe and from Europe for more than 500 years. And I'm very proud that this year our city got a special mention from the Kuan Yew World City Prize Council. But before I go into the topics that got us that special mention, I just want to say a few short words about the main figures of the city of Antwerp. First, it is an historic city. The Romans already built a village where Antwerp is situated today. So for thousands of years, people have been living in Antwerp. It's an historic city. Second feature, it's in the heart of Europe, as you can see on the slide. That has always been our very strong point. We have a very interesting geographical position. Third feature, we are a pocket-sized metropolis. Antwerp only has 530,000 inhabitants, but it hosts over 175 different nationalities. So it's not a very big city, but it's a very international city. And fourth feature, it is the economical powerhouse of my region, Flanders, and my country, Belgium. We are the second port of Europe, the first one being Rotterdam. I have to say that because colleague Abu Talib from Rotterdam is here. He's the first, we are second. We'll catch up to them. We are the second petrochemical cluster of the world, after Houston in the United States. And we are the world capital of diamonds. But enough about our strong points. Here are our major problems. First of all, mobility. Our strength is also our weakness. Due to our geographical position, due to the fact that we have a main port, we attract enormous amounts of traffic, which leads to problems of congestion, problems of air pollution, and of cars and trucks weighing very heavy on the livability of the city. Second problem, of course, climate change, like everywhere in the world. But specifically for Antwerp, because we are situated at a tidal river. The Schelde is not a river, it's a tidal river. It makes us vulnerable for fluvial floods, also for pluvial floods, droughts, of course, and heat waves. Heat waves that are much worse in cities, of course, and certainly, third problem, in dense cities like Antwerp. As I told you, it is an historic city with a medieval center, a lot of paved paved areas, densely built up neighborhoods, and a lack of green space. In the Middle Ages, people didn't care about green space. They built stone valleys, stone deserts. And of course, 20th century urbanism didn't make the right choices as we know today. So, what are we going to do about it? First, climate. We have a climate strategy, as most cities have. Vienna says 2040, we aim at 2050 with the second petrochemical cluster in the world. It's not that easy to say you will be carbon neutral by 2040. We're aiming for 2050. We have an ambitious plan. Many aspects of it have been talked about yesterday during the session. It was very recognizable. A specific feature for Antwerp is that we have the petrochemical cluster, which gives us the opportunity to try to harvest the rest heat of the petrochemical processes, and we're building, or we're going to build, a heat network to bring that heat to warm houses in a sustainable way. Now, I would like to show you two examples of climate-driven city renewal. And this is the first one. This is a 19th century picture of the south of the city. You can see there was still water, there were still docks in the city, which was typical of that era. There were no trucks, everything had to come by barge. There was a lot of water in the city. 20th century, they changed it, this is the same place, into this. This is typical for 20th century urbanism, post-war urbanism. The water was pushed out of the cities because water was often a source of pandemics, cholera pandemic. Water had to leave the city, they filled up the water areas. And of course, the car was welcomed into the city, they turned it into a gigantic parking lot. And this is a nowadays picture of the same place. The cars have been pushed underground. We created a park area, which is good for the urban heating effect. And under the park, there's also a gigantic collector for rainwater, which we will use to irrigate the city greenery. And we can later even purify to make drinking water of it. So now it looks a bit more like Singapore, I'm glad to say. And a bit less like the 20th century. Second example. This, believe it or not, is a 20th century picture of the case of our river. We used to tell a joke in Antwerp, we have the nicest parking lot in Europe. You can park your car right next to the river. Imagine the Marina Bay of Singapore, and on the case of it, cars. That's unimaginable. This was our reality in the 20th century. This is the same area today. We transformed it. Again, pushing the cars away, pushing them underground, transformed it into a playground you see here. But what you might not see is that we also made use of this transformation to build higher banks on the river, to protect the city against fluvial floods. And also we built, hidden in the landscape, higher flood walls. And it is the ambition to transform the entire length of the case of the river, which is 5 kilometers in the city. And I can already show you a render of what it is supposed to look like in a few years' time. The works are underway. This is now a construction site, but in a few years you'll see it like this. We will include, of course, bicycle highways, which we have been building all around the city to encourage the model shift. Use your bike instead of your car, and we were very successful in that. We're living a bicycle revolution, and when people can cycle the entire length of the case, that will, of course, make it even better. And the second render on the case of the river, we also like to construct a lot of green areas and meaningful places. Here you see a render of what's going to be a monument for the victims we lost in the Second World War. We lost 25,000 people, it was very bad. They don't have a monument. Well, the new open space will also be a meaningful open space with a green area where people can come and also contemplate our history. Second problem. First problem, of course, climate. Second problem, I told you we are an historic city. We are a very dense city, a lot of paved area. And that's not so easy to change. Yesterday I smiled a bit when Minister Desmond Lee said, you have to take in account that in Singapore an average building is already 30 years old, which is a problem. The house where I live in is almost 100 years old. My office is 500 years old. 30 years is nothing. So if you have a medieval city, it's not like Singapore where you can simply plan ahead how it's going to look like. You have to take in account hundreds, thousands years of history. It's not so easy to change. So what's the solution? That's the concept that Professor already mentioned of slow urbanism. We call it renovatio urbis. That's Latin because that sounds more fancy. Sounds always more fancy. The renewal of the city. We have to use piecemeal engineering, or I would say re-engineering, with a strategy. Every time we do construction, we try to make the city due to this process of slow urbanism, more in something that we would like to see. And this is an example of a street that's already finished following this concept. It is called a garden street. It absorbs water. It has a lot of greenery to absorb CO and also temper heat. And of course, this concept increases livability for our citizens living in that historical center. Then, problem number 3, the mobility. For our mobility, we, of course, are looking for many solutions, many measures to achieve the model shift that we're looking for. In bicycles, we've been very successful. Public transport, not so much, I must admit. Still a lot of work to do. I cannot mention all the measures we are taking, but one project really stands out, and that is the Big Link. And the Big Link is the largest construction work of this century in Europe. And it is aimed at resolving our congestion problems. But not only our congestion problems. The city made use of this gigantic work to also improve other problems. There we go. On the one hand, the Big Link will increase our road capacity. That's unavoidable due to the port. But on the other hand, a large part of the ring road around Antwerp will be covered, putting the traffic underground. So the Big Link will literally link neighborhoods that were cut off from each other in the 20th century by building the ring road. Typical for the 20th century, a freeway through the city, an open valley for the traffic. The valley will be closed and neighborhoods will be linked. 2, the Big Link will create an enormous amount of open space when the ring road is covered, and we will turn that into a green environment. And thirdly, the Big Link will create space for pedestrians, for cyclists, and for new tramways, hopefully to improve our model split. Still going on. And here's a render of how it will look like when it's finished. That's the same ring road you're looking at. In 2018, I had the opportunity here in Singapore to talk about the Big Link for the first time. I'm proud to say that now, 4 years later, the works are well underway. And next time I'm here, I hope to be here if you invite me again, I hope that this render will be an actual photo, that it will have been, will become reality. So in closing, here you see my office, which is 500 years old. It's a Renaissance building of the 16th century. I want to thank everybody for the organization of the World City Summit here in Singapore that brings us together to talk, but mainly to listen and to learn. Singapore is a city where you come to learn. I do believe, as it has been stressed by many speakers, that cities are the engine of change for the better in the 21st century. And it's a good thing that we can come together again physically to talk to each other, to learn from each other. I hope to see you all again here in Singapore, or better yet, in Antwerp. You are all very, very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for sharing with us Antwerp's unique urban initiatives. I would now like to invite Mr. Brian Golden, Director Emeritus of Boston Planning and Development Agency, or the BPDA. Mr. Golden served as the Director of BPDA for more than 8 years until earlier this year. He is the longest-serving leader in the agency's 65-year history. During his tenure, he has managed the biggest building boom in Boston's history and focused on improving transparency, accountability, and community engagement. Mr. Golden, please.
Thank you so much. It's indeed a pleasure to be here in Singapore for the first time in my life. What an amazing city. It is a privilege and an honor to be part of this gathering and the conversations that have occurred. I first of all want to express my deepest gratitude on behalf of Mayor Michelle Wu, the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and the people of Boston for the favorable consideration of the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize in designating Boston for special mention. I thank the leadership and staff of the World City Prize, the nominating committee, the jury. We are indeed overwhelmed and appreciative of this recognition for the work of the City of Boston in recent years. Now, there'll be an awful lot of similar themes to especially the narrative from Antwerp. The cities are very similarly situated, so there's going to be an element of commonality to the presentations. But Boston is America's oldest major coastal city. We'll celebrate our 400th birthday in 1630. That's as old as it gets in the United States. And while that brings us a rich history of which we are deeply proud, this initial image that you're looking at tells you part of the problem that we're going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future, which is we have to live with a city whose physical plant, the built environment, dates in small part to the 17th century. There's a little bit of that left. There's some 18th century. There's a whole lot of 19th century and 20th century that never thought of climate change or sea level rise. We're going to have to wrestle with these problems for decades to come. But the good news is we are wrestling with them very intentionally and very deliberately day by day, and we've had some concrete successes that I want to share with you. So first, our challenges. We've got a growing population now. To mega cities, 100,000 new people moving in the past decade doesn't seem like a lot, but we're a city of 600,000 people 10 years ago. Now we're just breaking 700,000, probably heading back to our post-World War II high. The biggest population in the city's history was 800,000 people at the end of World War II. 50s, 60s, 70s, we hemorrhaged. A third of our population exited. Increasing prosperity in the post-World War II period pushed a burgeoning middle class out to the suburbs. So suburbia picked up population. Boston was left with a declining physical stock. By the end of the 1950s, 25% of the housing was considered decadent, blighted, substandard. And the population fell from 800,000 people down to 550,000 people. In the 1980s, population began to grow, and in the 21st century, it has grown at quite a brisk pace, about 8,000 or 9,000 people a year. Again, a city of our size, that's significant growth, and we wrestle with that because the demographic shift associated with that means a lot of affluent people are moving to Boston. We're growing because, in part, we've become one of the most significant life science clusters on Earth. Educated populations are moving to the city to seek jobs in this very vibrant ecosystem of life sciences. We are, after all, the higher ed capital of America. There are 30 colleges and universities within the political boundaries of the city of Boston. That doesn't include the suburbs. That doesn't include the rest of the state of Massachusetts. So we've got a world of affluent, educated, newer arrivals mixing with lower income, blue collar, working class folks. That presents challenges associated with gentrification and potential displacement. So growing population, life science cluster is really an extraordinary new aspect of life in Boston. Certainly the most significant life science cluster in America and one of the most significant life science clusters in the world. But we've been building to keep up with that. We've permitted 90 million square feet of new development in the past decade. That's almost 50,000 new units of housing. And to deal with the pressures associated with affluent new arrivals driving the creation of market rate housing, we've been using our policy tools to mandate that all new market rate housing must create certain percentages of affordable housing, income restricted, deed restricted housing. And Boston has more income restricted housing as a matter of regulation associated with our permitting power than any other city in America. I'm going to focus on climate change now. 40 inches of sea level rise for a city perched on the harbor, 40 inches of sea level rise expected by 2070, not so far away, and that's 47 miles of harbor that borders the city. 47 miles of all the ins and outs, the wharfs, the piers, that's a lot of territory to protect with policy and physical interventions, a major challenge for the city. But here's the planning we've been doing to get ourselves ready today and well into the future. We've adopted forward-looking plans. Imagine Boston 2030. It might be surprising to folks. What I think is a fairly sophisticated city, the city of Boston, we didn't have a citywide plan. There was no citywide general plan since 1965. We lived without one. We made it up as we went along. And by 2015, the new mayor at the time, Martin Walsh, decided we're going to do a citywide plan. We adopted Imagine Boston 2030, significant piece of that, which is a plan for the remainder to get Boston through the remainder of the decade. Component pieces focused extensively on climate. We did a separate plan, Climate Ready Boston, which looked at climate, sea level rise, decarbonization issues for the city as a whole. And then we did a series of district plans and more surgical strikes, literally parcel by parcel all along that 47 square mile, identifying the real vulnerabilities associated with the flood paths into the city that could cripple and devastate not just what is the capital city of Massachusetts, but it is in fact the economic capital of New England, the 6 northeastern states in the US. So the stakes are high, and we're doing planning and physical interventions that hopefully will get us where we need to be day by day in the coming years. So Imagine Boston 2030. We did a citywide plan. We're doing 14 square miles of more granular planning right now. That's 30% of the city's landmass. You can see it in this image, the blue, the pink, there's some orange in there. These are all of our granular planning studies that focus not just on climate change, but each one of them has a significant element that addresses climate change, sea level rise, decarbonization. These conversations are going on about these plans in every single neighborhood on a weekly basis. Over the past decade, we do about 350 community engagements on planning and development issues formally by the agency in all of our neighborhoods. This is just a series of the planning documents, both the sort of macro, the grand vision, as well as the more granular, the district, and key flood paths that we are seeking to address through physical interventions and policy interventions in the coming years, but just a smattering of the documents we've been working on over the past several years. Now, Climate Ready Boston was our grand city document. We've spent a lot of time when the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize nominating committee visited Boston. We spent a lot of time talking about these documents, about the planning documents, and the fact that the goal was that they would give way to actual zoning. Significant zoning has occurred since even the Lee Kuan Yew delegation arrived in Boston just before COVID at the end of 2019. So we've adopted a macro climate ready plan. And one of the key things we needed to do is invest heavily in flood maps. Now, historically in the United States, when we look at floodplains, we look at where the floodplain is today and has been, where we know it to be. Most cities do not look prospectively, but we commissioned significant analysis that went on for quite some time to identify where the water is going to be in the coming decades, and we use that as our template, the basis for all the sea level rise and climate change planning that has occurred in recent years. Here's one of the really special spots in the heart of Boston, in our hearts physically and metaphysically. Martin Richard Park is over in the downtown area. You see the downtown skyline, and on the other side of what we call the Fort Point Channel is Martin Richard Park. Martin Richard was the youngest victim of the terror attack in 2013, the bombing along the Boston Marathon route. Beautiful little boy, and we dedicated a park in his memory. It's universally accessible for children of all abilities, but before the park's design was finalized, we're focusing on this channel as a result of some of the work I just described, the flood maps, the new flood maps, the prospective flood maps, and we realize Fort Point is a nightmare. It's a rather small body of water that sits between the seaport of Boston, newly developed area of about 20 million square feet. It keeps going, and on the other side of that channel is the downtown area. But we had to dedicate ourselves to identifying places all along Fort Point which can provide really significant bang for our buck when it comes to preventing flood paths from inundating the city. So Martin Richard Park is not only a beautiful park in the memory of Martin Richard, but it's accessible for children of all abilities and disabilities, and it is also resilient, and significant investments were catalyzed by that, both in the private sector and with public resources all along Fort Point to help us begin to prepare Boston for 40 inches of sea level rise. We brought the Lee Kuan Yew delegation to look at that park, which is a very special place to all of us. Here, interesting to me that when independence, well, post-independence, 59 is independence for Singapore, but the British military leaves at the end of the 60s and leaves about 15% of Singapore was British military bases. So it's left behind. And Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew had an opportunity to use that space to generate business activity and attract businesses from all over the world. It was remarkably successful, as we all know, but we had a little bit of that going on. In the mid-1970s, President Nixon closes an Army and Navy base in 2 parts of Boston. We took control of it, and we have turned it into significant economic engine for Boston, both in Charlestown and the Navy Yard and the Flynn Marine Park in South Boston. It also gives us opportunity controlling that geography to incorporate significant resiliency measures going forward along the water's edge. Next, New Balance Athletic Shoe Company. I think that's now become a household name. When I was growing up, it wasn't. It's headquartered in the Alston-Brighton neighborhood near Harvard University. That was gritty old industrial property. It was a cattle yard up until the 50s. Up until a few years ago, it remained sort of single-story warehouse type functions. Now it is headquarters to the New Balance Athletic Shoe Company, the Boston Celtics basketball team practice facility, the Boston Bruins practice facility, Bose Acoustics, one of its 2 headquarters buildings, and one of the most sophisticated running tracks in the world. That has all come about because of really good planning, 2 years worth of planning that gave way to a whole lot of economic and cultural activity in that part of Boston. Finally, I'm going to wrap up here. This is the headquarters of the Boston Public Schools. We brought the delegation there in late 2019. We moved the school committee bureaucracy, which is very large, half the city's budget is the schools. We moved them out of the downtown and into the historic heart of Boston's Black community, Nubian Square, and it has provided a significant catalyst role for development in Nubian Square, helping us accomplish really key equity goals that the City of Boston has set for itself. With that, I'm sorry, I do want to point this one out. The Greenway, lots of people know the Big Dig. That bit of nomenclature has been kicking around now for a couple of decades. The Big Dig used to be, it's 1.5 miles stretched through the heart of downtown Boston. It was an elevated interstate, a steel interstate moving right along that green strip. In the early 21st century, $15 billion project, put an 8-lane federal US interstate underground, capped it with these parks. They're signature parks, really important to Boston's sense of self. It continues to demonstrate the forward-looking planning that has been characterized the work of the Boston Planning and Development Agency for the past couple of decades. So with that, I thank you for allowing me to be part of the conversation, and thank you for your kindness and your generosity of spirit and all the attention that was devoted to the city of Boston back pre-COVID in 2019. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Golden, for sharing the insights of Boston's successes. I would now like to invite our final speaker, Ms. Sofia Mourão, Municipal Director of Urbanism, Lisbon. As the Municipal Director, she oversees the areas of public space, licensing, and urban planning. Before that, she was the head of the Public Space Division and coordinator of the Public Space Program, A Square in Each Neighborhood. Ms. Mourão, please.
Good morning, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sofia Mourão, and I am the Lisbon City Council Director for Urbanism, comprising 5 departments: urban planning, urban licensing and construction permits, major projects developments, urban management and support, and public space. I am humbled to represent the city of Lisbon on behalf of our mayor, Carlos Moedas. I am honored to receive the special mention of the Kuan Yew World City Prize 2020. This prize belongs to our team back in Lisbon, who made a remarkable job in the development of the city. As you all know, Portugal holds centuries of a rich and universal history. Yes, we sailed around the world, but well before that, Lisbon became the capital of the kingdom in 1255 due to its strategic position. Lisbon was first built within a fortified wall and a castle. Today, the city has spread over 100 square kilometers, where 546,000 citizens live. Lisbon is also under pressure from a large metropolitan area that accounts for nearly 3 million people and 10 million tourists visiting every year. In any case, seems happy to live in Lisbon according to iVisa. Lisbon came out first in the ranking of the happiest city in the world, famed for its warm and sunny climates, colorful, quaint buildings, great nightlife and music, quality of life and low cost of living, and for sure, the friendliness of our people. So, given the enormous pressure the city is subject to, how did Lisbon become a resilient city after the financial crisis between 2010 and 2014? Well, we identified 4 main areas to act. We set strategic objectives for the city and developed some innovative schemes to meet those objectives. We identified key urban interventions that would lead to better public space. We invited the citizens to participate and drive the change in their communities. We defined long-term policies to cope with climate change and promote social equality. One key objective is to enable the average citizen or family to live in the city. Therefore, we developed the Affordable Rent Program. This program promotes quality housing that local people can afford, with typologies adapted to the needs of the population. The Lisbon City Council developed the frameworks for the financing, housing access, building management, and maintenance of the buildings. The goal is to offer the population sustainable and cost-effective residential areas, green parks, access to healthcare and other public facilities, well connected with public transportation and soft mobility systems. On strategic urban interventions, let me tell you about the requalification of the riverfront. This major program intends to eliminate the many barriers that restrain people's access to the river. Respecting the river's function and scenic nature, extensive interventions were made on the 19 kilometers of waterfront. This noble area, mostly hijacked by the Port of Lisbon, was requalified to increase urban recreation, leisure, and water sports. The construction of continuous green corridors across the entire city is another good illustration of a very successful urban intervention. Such corridors consolidated the ecological continuity of the land and greatly improved the connectivity of the communities. Individuals and families can now travel free by foot or using any available set of wheels. The European Union recognized the merits of the program, granting Lisbon the 2020 Green Capital Award. A square in each neighborhood. This program is very dear to me, as my team led the planning, the projects, and the supervision of the works for the last 9 years. The goal of the program was to create livable and attractive public areas, to entice the people to leave their houses, enjoy the city, shop, and socialize. We designed the space for pedestrians' access to leisure points, new green areas, and high-quality aesthetic public space. The construction of the squares encouraged further private investment, triggering the rehabilitation of buildings, boosting commerce, and creating jobs. Furthermore, we planned and implemented a comprehensive and well-connected pedestrian network, breaking down the many barriers from roads and railroads. The network is accessible to anyone by foot or wheels, links public facilities, historical sites, and green areas. These infrastructures is further used to access cultural, sports, and commercial activities. Traffic and parking space got restructured in favor of public, pedestrian, and more sustainable transportation. As we now experience in every major city, the concept of modernity has evolved. City built for cars are giving way to cities built for people. Lisbon is steering its own transition for a car-based city to a citizen-centric city. Lisbon is leveraging new technologies for mobility, IT platforms, and offering a variety of smooth and electric mobility modes to promote an attractive and sustainable experience, eliminating traffic and pollution. Now, I'd like to show you a little bit of our participatory processes with the example of the regeneration of Moraria, where people drove the change of their own neighborhoods. A lot has changed in the Moraria quarter. It all started in 2010 when a citizens' movement submitted an application during the participatory budgeting process. With their proposal, they won €1 million to apply on their projects for the whole neighborhood, promoting the cohesion. And we started to see real changes. The security increased and the neighborhood became more visible. Several private buildings were rehabilitated and new businesses settled there. Moving on a subject near and dear to our hearts and to millions around the world, we have to talk about climate change. How is Lisbon facing it? Well, we are firmly committed to achieve the climate goals, and we were the first European capital city to sign the new Compact for Climate Energy. After achieving a 50% fall in CO2 emissions, a 23% drop in energy consumption, and a 17% reduction in water consumption. Also, to deal with climate change, we currently have 3 major projects underway. A drainage plan that will allow us to mitigate one of the most serious consequences of climate change, floods. Lisbon Solar City, where a municipal energy fund will support the installation of thermal and photovoltaic solar panels for the decentralized production of energy in residential buildings. And RESIST, Seismic Resilience Program, which promotes seismic resilience of private and municipal buildings and infrastructures. Another measure taken by the Lisbon City Council to fight climate change and to improve people's mobility was free public transport for residents in Lisbon aged 65 or over and students. These measures are implemented to encourage the use of public transport. We believe that the key point of public policies is to serve the people. Therefore, we try to align our policies with our citizens' demands. Our main goal is to build a city with and for the people. People who were born in the city and those who choose to live there and start a family. People who stay there to study, work, or start their businesses. We are all Lisbon. Muito obrigada. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Murau, for your presentation on Lisbon's transformation story. We would like to invite you to take your seat on stage while we invite His Excellency Dr. Michael Ludwig, His Excellency Bhatti Weaver, and Mr. Brian Golden back on stage for the panel discussion. During this session, we will invite you to pose your questions using Slido. And to access Slido, please scan the QR code on the screen. We would also like to invite our moderators for the panel discussion, Professor Marilyn Taylor and Mr. Wong Man Sam, on stage. Professor Taylor is a professor of architecture and urban design and the former dean of the School of Design, University of Pennsylvania. She is internationally known for her distinguished and passionate involvement in the design of large-scale urban projects and civic initiatives. Mr. Wong is the joint founding director of Woha Architects, one of Southeast Asia's best-known and most awarded architectural practices based in Singapore. Woha has won many local and international awards, including the President's Design Award 2020 for Kampong Admiralty and the Best Tall Building Worldwide for Asia Hotel Downtown. Without further ado, let me now hand over the time to our moderators, Professor Taylor and Mr. Wong.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, almost, but we're going to continue on here for about another 15 or 20 minutes, tying this together and learning a little bit more about each of the cities. As everyone was presenting, it seems to be a tale not of 2 cities, but of 4 cities that are all incredible in various ways and maintain through the change that's going on now the distinctive identities that makes them so special to all of us. Social cohesion, renewal, embracing the vulnerability to sea rise, and actually overcoming financial crisis, which I now remember was a very deep and difficult thing to do. And when you go back there, you just see now what the success has been. So to start this off, what if we just for a moment reflect on, of the things you said today, which are the ones that you believe will make the greatest difference to your city? Brian, can I start with you?
So there's no question, and I think this is a recurring theme in this room yesterday and today, climate change and sea level rise for us is an existential threat. We're extremely vulnerable. Primarily, we've got firm idea policies in place and even physical interventions that are beginning to address climate change right now as it relates to new development. New development must be resilient. New development must contribute to broader resiliency measures. I think we've got that in hand pretty well. The real challenge is, what do you do with an old city? The vast majority of our built environment is over 50, 100, 150 years old. That's not uncommon. What do you do to retrofit those buildings to make sure they're resilient, that they can either resist the water's advances or they can live with water? What are the legal inhibitions? What are the legal problems associated with forcing landlords to retrofit structures that they've owned for quite some time? These new mandates, that's what we have to wrestle with. What do we do with the legacy built environment? And we've begun that process, but I don't think we have long-term answers yet. But what I take some confidence and hope in is, if we had this conversation a decade ago, it bears no resemblance to what it is today. Both the political culture and the business culture, the real estate ownership and development culture in the city of Boston is in a very different place today than it was 10 years ago. Very receptive to doing things differently because it's in the private sector's interest as well. So I'm very optimistic, even though we don't have the answer today, but it is our job to figure that out.
On to your turn. We're playing ping pong here.
One of the things that I think we're all grappling with now is that we've gone through a very interesting time the last 2 years. I kind of like to bring the discussion to what we've learned and what we've done. What do you need to review and rethink to improve further? Maybe we could start with Vienna, the city of Vienna.
I think one point is the measures against the climate change is one of the most important points in our cities. It's one important point, and I think also the mutual crisis. We have many crises to the same time. Of the pandemic is one, it's a health crisis. Then we have in Europe the war in the Ukraine and a very high inflation with economic problems, and also social problems with these topics. And I think it's a big problem for the cities to finance all social programs in the cities, and also in the difference to the regions and to the national governments, for example.
in our country.
Sophia, would you like to chip in?
I want to share that we have to prepare the cities for the climate change. We have to work for it, but also prepare to mitigate. So all the strategies and the programs must be think to what can it happen. The cities and the pandemic is something we have to think. Are we prepared for something that we are not expecting?
I think something that we're all grappling with, particularly in Singapore, because we are an island state. Supply chains are greatly affected. And also, I think we are also affected by food security. From a standpoint of a city, how could you cope with that? I think Singapore hasn't got the luxury of a hinterland to produce our food. But I think in some of your cities and countries, you have that. But can cities themselves start to be more resilient and ensure food security within the city?
Go ahead, Bart.
That's a difficult question, so it's for me. I think Singapore proves that you can do it. And that what struck me in the 4 presentations is there's one similarity between all our cities, and that is that we're trying to put crisis into opportunity. We all know climate change will be very challenging, and that we have to ask sacrifices to our citizens. It will become more expensive to own a car. It will be more expensive to use a car. Underground parking will be more expensive. But if this means that, on the other hand, your city looks nicer, your water gets cleaner, you can drive your bicycle safely, air gets cleaner, then people see the opportunity in the crisis as well. And I think that is what we need if we need to get support of our population in the coming decades to a complete transition that we have to do. You have to show the benefits of it. Living in a cleaner city, a nicer city, a more sustainable city is simply a good thing for your citizens. And that's the similarity I see between Singapore, but also in the 4 presentations. It's a challenge, but let's turn it into opportunity.
I think it's important that we find a mix from houses of one side and working places of the other side, but also green areas. In Vienna is the half of the territorium green spaces and water. And I think it's important that we find this mix between working places, houses, apartments of one side, and of the other side, greenfield areas. And to look of these places, of these green places, because it's very important for the climate. And in Vienna, more than the half is green area, and old industrial is formed in parks, for example. And we have for some years 50% green spaces, and today 53%, and have more apartments than yesterday. It's possible to find a mix of green area and other parts of the city.
So the question was in large part about food security. Again, 2 years ago, I'm not sure what I would have said, but in the past 2 years, the agency that I led, the Planning and Development Agency, was tasked with creating a system of food distribution during the COVID era. We realized at the beginning of the pandemic that the variety of actors who provide food and sustenance to vulnerable populations who are really threatened by food insecurity in the best of circumstances were not up to the task of doing it in a pandemic. The pervasiveness of the danger was obviously extraordinary, and there was no apparatus in the city to knit together all of the variety of actors to make sure we identified where the gaps were and how to fill those gaps. So the planning agency undertook that. It was a specific request of the mayor. Let's face it, a whole lot of us were doing other things throughout the pandemic anyway. The reviewing development proposals wasn't the priority in 2020 and even well into 2021. So this was an activity that we threw ourselves into, literally dozens of staffers, created a structure and made sure that people were in place to execute a plan to address food insecurity. That was, and obviously hard to talk about blessings in disguise and silver linings in the pandemic, but it is something we learned. There is, in fact, an Office of Food Insecurity that operates out of Boston City Hall now. And even before the pandemic, we did some novel things, recognizing that we should, where we can, in an old city that is small, we're only 48 square miles, there aren't a lot of open space opportunities, but there are some. And we adopted urban farming zoning that allows small farms to exist on vacant parcels and other open space throughout the city. So we've learned, I think, a lot in the past few years and have begun to act upon it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to a smart city, to a city with short distances, because we have agriculture in the city and the people can buy the vegetables from the field. In Vienna, we have 14% of the area is agriculture, and the most is biological agriculture, and it's one of the best form to bring vegetables or fruits to the people short distance in the same city.
So carry on a little bit. You opened up your presentation with the importance of social cohesion. How did that change over the last couple of years, and how is it going to change in the future?
I think social cohesion is a very important topic because there are new themes in urban policy. The world of digital, for example, and it's very important that we see it as, of one side, the chance to have digital in the economy, for example, in the school, in the medicine, but also there's a danger for the society because there are people that have the chance to find a way to the digital and others don't find this way. And I think it's very important that we look at the education system in schools, but also in the adult education system for the older people, for example, that they always find the way to the digital world.
I think all four cities have talked about their strategies for mobility, and I think particularly the good term was the slow mobility. And I think almost all the cities have done very well in creating cycling paths, pedestrianizing the waterfronts, and creating a lot more park. How do you make this transition? We know how hard it is for people to give up cars. How difficult and how was it done to actually convince people to actually give up their cars and to actually use slow mobility?
In case of Lisbon, is involving them. In the beginning, when we had these sessions talking about the projects we wanted to implement, people were very skeptic. They were, oh, but how can I bring my goods to my house? And but when we do the first project and people feel the difference, and they have a public space that where they can enjoy, they get more open. So this is a process, and this systemic process is what.
So you engage the community, use start slow, and a pilot project.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Well, this is very recognizable. The idea of owning your own car is a symbol of prosperity. In the 1960s of the latest century, people got to own their own car. And everything the city did was Oh, now there are cars, you can have a car. Please come with your car to the city. I'll build a parking lot for you. I will accommodate you. Please come to the city with your car. And now 50 years later we say, oh, that was a big mistake. Now we ask you to leave your car at home, maybe consider life without a car or using cycles, bicycles, or tramways that you abandoned. That these were the things your father and your grandfather had to use because they were poor. And now you have to live like your grandfather again. You have to use the politics of the carrot and the stick. The carrot is persuasion. You build these cycle freeways. We've built them all around and through Antwerp. You can safely drive your bicycle. You do not cross cars. You're very fast. You're not in congestion. So it's quicker. It's safe. It's nice. You have the electrical bicycle, which is a real revolution. So it's easy to cycle. That's the persuasion part. Of course, the stick part is it's becoming more difficult to enter the city with your car. If you're have a polluting car, you're no longer welcome. You cannot enter the city of Antwerp. If you do enter the city with your car, as I've shown, the parking lots are underground, so they're expensive. The parking lots above ground, they were often free of charge. Now you have to pay a lot for your car. And if there are too many cars, we make it even more expensive. It's a bit like Singapore, make it more expensive to use your car. That's the stick part. So we hope with the carrot and the stick that we can produce change. But to be honest, it's like in Lisbon, it's a difficult process. And
it's
psychologically, it's for many people, it's not easy to let go of the idea having a car and driving it everywhere they want.
But it seems like you put in a lot of infrastructure, the bicycle highways and all that to convince people. So you put in the hardware first to convince them. Is that the approach as well?
Yeah, you have to put in the hardware. If you want to persuade people, you have to put your money where your mouth is. And that's what I talked when I said, when I recognized the similarity between the four cities, turn the crisis into an opportunity, saying you have to change your life,
Yes.
but it will not be for the worse. If you accept change, it can also be for the better, because driving your bicycle is, of course, also healthier than driving a car.
Once again, I think Boston and Antwerp are living parallel lives on opposite sides of the Atlantic, because it's a similar story. It is, in fact, a generational matter, no question about it. Older Boston loves the big four-door V8 engine Chevrolet, and younger Boston, more white-collar professional Boston, not as interested, open to the notion that they could live in an apartment near in a transit-oriented development and move around through mass transit and ride sharing and the like, multimodal transportation, bikes. I mean, we're nowhere near where we need to be on bikes in Boston, but we're making steady progress every year. Multiple miles of new bike lanes, multiple miles of new bus rapid transit every year. But I want to reference back to New Balance. Every time we confront a significant concern about cars, we try to tell neighborhoods, you know, we use it as a teachable moment. We're having 350 planning and development conversations every year in our neighborhoods. And we explain how the new development can, in fact, help with transportation issues as opposed to cause a traffic nightmare. I reference back to the New Balance building, the New Balance World Headquarters. It was a 2 million square development. Now, granted, the footprint it was taking place in was sort of gritty industrial, but it's surrounded on most sides by residential low-density neighborhoods. But it was a love-in, and not all projects are like this, but their 2 million square feet of development was a love-in, and in large part because the New Balance athletic shoe company spent more than $20 million to build a new train stop right there that gets you to downtown Boston in 6 minutes. Those types of stories, you know, unlock development potential. If we have a good story to tell about mobility, we can get people off and out of the cars and embracing development that adds a whole lot more to life than big automobiles in the neighborhood.
There is definitely a difference in the United States in terms of getting people out of their cars. What is it that makes you all much more successful in using the car less, not having a car? What are some suggestions in terms of making that change work better here in my United States? Have you got a story or two to tell?
Sorry, members of the panel, we have run out of time, but if you could quickly summarize in a sentence, then we need to move on, sorry.
Marilyn, I think we discussed we would like to actually ask one question for every panelist here to tell us what advice have you got for other cities who might want to come in for the prize next. Sophia, would you start with you?
The advice is keeping invests in making good public space. I think the public space is for where the people can enjoy the city. And in the pandemic times, it was so important having good public space, and our riverfront that we had renovated was where people could go out of their houses during the pandemic. So public space.
So public space.
Yes.
Mayor De Weaver?
Well, I can only give one lesson, and that's the lesson I learned when I came here to Singapore for the very first time in 2013, and I visited the Center of Livable Cities, and I took one lesson home with me, that is plan ahead, think strategically, persevere.
Mayor Lockwood?
Yes, I think it's very important to work hard and to make a plan and speak about this.
Brian?
I'm sorry, could you restate the question?
Have you got any advice for other cities who might want to come in for the prize?
Boy.
Just one.
So one of the reasons we were awarded special recognition by the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize was Boston's approach to civic engagement. And the reality is we've just come through the biggest building boom in history, almost 100 million square feet of new development, almost 60,000 new units of housing either built or permitted. The only way we can get political consensus around that scale of development is by having iterative conversations in the neighborhood day after day consistently. Nothing works the first, second, third, fourth conversation. It is all about community engagement. Everything we do, building resiliency, mobility, equity, making clear to neighbors how everybody benefits from our efforts, whether it's resiliency, development, creation of affordable housing. We need everybody in the city to understand what's in it for them, not just affluent people who work in life sciences or other sophisticated businesses. We need everybody to understand that there are benefits that flow to them, whether it's jobs, whether it's property taxes, whether it's job training programs, which in Boston are largely funded by commercial development. Commercial development pays into a linkage fund that does job training that primarily benefits low-income people of color disproportionately benefit. We have to have these conversations constantly. When we talk about social cohesion, people feeling a sense of community, that it's not just the haves versus the have-nots, New Boston versus lower income, more modest income, older, legacy populations. We have conversations over and over again. We have to educate. We have to explain ourselves. We have to get buy-in to our decisions. And the only way we do that is by explaining ourselves over and over again.
So thank you, members of the panel and our moderators. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you very much for taking the questions. Please remain seated on stage as we will now screen a special video to announce the opening of the nominations for the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize 2024. We would like to announce the launch of our latest book, the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize, celebrating 10 years of the prize. You may download a digital copy of the book by scanning the QR code that you now see on screen. We would like to thank our speakers for the insightful sharings and exciting discussion, and to our moderators for leading the fruitful discussion. We would also like to invite Dr. Chong back on stage for a photo-taking session. Playbacks of this session will be available in our virtual conference, which will be starting from 10th August. Please scan the QR code on the screen for more information about the WCS 2022 virtual conference. Before you leave, please use the QR code to link to fill in our feedback form. After the break, there will be a lunch open to all delegates, and the lunch will have a panel on the art and sustainability in cities. The lunch will also feature world-renowned artist Bordalo Sigundu, as well as special entertainment featuring green drumming. The program will commence at 12:45. Please remember to take your belongings with you as you exit the room, as the room will need to be prepared for lunch. Thank you everyone, and have a wonderful lunch and the rest of the day.